You would have to be more than 40 years old to have heard and remembered one of the greatest motivational addresses that has ever been given in the history of America. The time was the year 1933. The country was in the depths of one of the most crippling depressions. People were hungry. People were out of work. Pennies were jealously guarded. Men with families were frustrated with bills and no money, cost of groceries and very little cash. Clothing was to be bought, education to be provided, shoes for the kids and a dress for mother. And competition was fierce for every order, every sale, every dollar. Family after family was living from one paycheck to the next, hoping for better things, but fearing for the worst. It was in this kind of an economic picture that a new leader, a polio cripple, a man of great courage and much determination, a man that had a personal interest in the welfare and the livelihood of the individual American, came to grips with the day-to-day problems of men much like you and much like me. He knew that every day was a war of survival, that every day was to many an insurmountable task, a challenge to succeed when success seemed so very far away. But he knew that the ability to win was still with the American people, that the frustrations of the hour could be erased, that the discouraged could find new hope and a brighter future. Well, you know, in my mind's eye, I can well imagine that Franklin Roosevelt in that hour must have been saying to himself, if I can but rekindle the will to win, if somehow I can convince the people that the price we must pay to win is worth the effort and the planning, the work and the discouragement, then we will win again, and we will win together. Each individual that listened that day needed new faith in himself, needed a challenge to live by, needed someone to point the way, so you can well understand why the tide changed, why the future became brighter, why men took heart again as the words came through that radio speaker, words that spoke to the nation of individuals in the broad accent of a man that believed in himself, believed in his purpose, and believed in his people, saying, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. What a simple truth. What a human fallacy. But with these words, our nation turned, lifted its eyes, and began to move out and up as it hadn't moved before or since. Today, that challenge is unchanged. Each day is, in essence, a day created to be conquered, frustrations to be erased, discouragements to be mastered, lives to be built and futures to be secured, families to be cared for, children to be educated, loved ones to be protected. It's a new job every 24 hours. And for each person, the objective is either survival, satisfaction, or success, depending upon the degree of your purpose in life. But the entire process is still encased with the same destructive, undermining, and compromising human weakness that faced America on that gloomy day in 1933, fear. I'd like to tell you about an experience that took place several years ago at Caddo Lake, nestled in the piney woods of East Texas, an experience that was to remain with me all of my life. It was an ordinary sort of a day, warm and sunny, with a quiet whispering in the branches of the pine trees. It was the kind of a day when nothing of importance ever seems to happen. But today was due to be very important to me. A couple of my friends had joined me in the shade of the pine trees there at Johnson's Ranch to spend just a few minutes in idle gossip and business chatter. We were just a few feet away from the old horse watering trough that had been resting peacefully in front of Johnson's Ranch for a decade or so. Since horses had long since given away to cars and trucks, Mr. Johnson had divided the old trough into two sections by placing a piece of window glass across the center, forming a minnow box in one end and a live box in the other end. In the bait end of the box, there were 200 or 300 shining minnows, and in the live box end, nothing. In a few moments, a fisherman came up on the boats with just one fish on his line, a sizable sucker, the member of the carp family of fish. He dropped the lone sucker into the live box end of the trough and proceeded to have his lunch in the restaurant. Our natural curiosity was centered around the sucker's actions when he discovered the large school of minnows in the opposite end of the tank. And our curiosity was soon satisfied when, with an amazing burst of speed, the old sucker made a headlong dash to feast on this newfound bonanza, but without knowledge of the glass partition. And wham! He hit this glass and recoiled. A second time, and he fell back frustrated in anger. He tried a third, a fourth, even a fifth time, but with no apparent reason, he couldn't win. About that time, Mr. Johnson came out to visit with us, and we told him of the things that had been happening. Why, go ahead, he said. Let that sucker eat a few minutes if he wants to. At least he's worked hard enough for a few. So with that invitation, we slowly slipped the glass partition out of its frame, removing the barrier between the sucker and the minnows. For 2 or 3 minutes, the old sucker swam around in the end of his tank, trying to muster up enough courage and enough determination to give it just one more try. Then here he came at full speed and as defiant as a sucker could be, but then a strange thing happened. Just moments and inches before he came to the place where the glass partition had been before it was removed, he made an abrupt U-turn and went back to his end of the tank. Time after time, when he would get the will to try again, he would rush up to that point and turn back. Never again did he cross the line into the harvest of fine minnows. This old sucker became afraid of things that he could not see. Fear controlled him. His initiative was crushed. His fight was gone. His courage had died. As a matter of fact, the old sucker was so possessed by fear that he refused to give it just one more honest try. Because of the circumstances that he could not understand, he was willing to live off of grubs and water bugs rather than to pay the price of success. Fear had made him lose his will to win. You know, as I travel across this country of ours, I meet a lot of people that remind me so very much of that old sucker. They have tried, not once, but many times, to be a credit to their family and to their children. Perhaps at one time they really wanted to succeed, but because of the disappointments in the commercial world, the maltreatments of those that they had trusted, and perhaps even the testing of competition, they had given up the desire to win. This is why we have so many people today that are content to hang around at the foot of the ladder of success, that refuse to listen to suggestions for improvement, that turn a deaf ear to management suggestions, and that refuse to participate in stimulation programs offered for their welfare. For all practical purposes, they are a lost cause. Webster says that fear is the painful agitation of apprehension and anxiety within that is often accompanied by a complete loss of courage without. You know, you can see this fear complex in people when they spend hours telling you why their customers will not buy. You see the fear complex in people that get into their cars, drive out to see a customer, and turn around before they get there and never finish the trip. You see this fear complex in people that walk up to the door of a customer's office and refuse to turn the knob and walk in. You see this fear complex in people that complain about their work, complain about their company, complain about their product, and in each case always trying to find a reason why it can't be done. These are frustrated, mixed-up people that have lost much of the will to win. And gentlemen, just like that old sucker found out, fear is a miserable circumstance to live with. Perhaps of all of the experiences of mankind, nothing is as frustrating as fear. Let me show you what I mean. In talking with a fine young salesman in a Midwest office several years ago, I asked him why he no longer called on a large electrical wholesale supply house near his office. Well, it's because of that purchasing agent they have, Heartsill. He is literally hell on wheels, and I'm not about to get tied up with him again. Once was enough. And what this young man didn't know was this, that Mr. Chamberlain, the purchasing agent that he feared so much, had died 17 months earlier. But the fear of this man was still with that young salesman that didn't even know that there was a new buyer on the job. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever found yourself afraid to ask for an order? I have, and I've got lots of company. Research shows that better than 40% of the potential buyers today, while shopping, are never asked to purchase anything by the salesman. Have you ever changed your mind on a subject in order not to be criticized about your position later on? I have. Have you ever agreed on a decision when you didn't really believe in it yourself, just in order to save your face in case the idea was good? I have. Have you ever missed a deal rather than to force yourself upon a customer for fear that you might be criticized later on for being too pushy, too hard-nosed? I have. And so have most of you. We never call it fear. We camouflage its true name under many descriptive adjectives. Why we call it intuition. We call it common sense. We call it perceptiveness, and we refer to it as experience. But never, never do we call it fear. But in essence, we are no less than that frustrated sucker that had lost his will to win. And without willpower, my friend, you become a creature of compromise. This old suckerfish chickened out every time the chips were down. And the minute that he feared, indecision and frustration took command of his life, and he could no longer control his emotions or his attitudes, and he found it very easy to surrender and to compromise. I've seen this happen to men in all walks of life, with educated men, with uneducated men. I've seen it happen with wealthy men and with a moderate income individual. You've seen it in professional football players and boxers. For example, the first Patterson-Liston fight closely symbolizes what I mean. In the instance of Patterson, this man, capable in his own right, was beaten by frustrations and fear long before the bell ever rang for the first round. You know, when things get tough, or the circumstances of your business life are choppy and rugged, when competition is cheating your best efforts, when the tide is running against us, there is a great temptation to turn tail and to run, a temptation to chicken out and quit. I know, because I have experienced every one of these emotions myself. When you are frustrated and begin to compromise, you will find it also very easy to settle for a mediocre income and half a loaf from the bread of life. This old sucker chose water bugs to shining minnows rather than to fight against his fears. I'm always troubled when I travel around this country of ours, visiting in salesmen's homes, meeting their families, to see what a man will do to his family and to himself, what he will accept in life rather than to pay the price of success. You know, it'll tear your heart out. Homes without drapers, living rooms with worn carpets, mismatched dishes on the dining table, time-worn furniture, hand-me-down clothes on some of the finest kids you've ever seen in your life. A wife that deserves much nicer things than she is enjoying, not because he cannot provide better things for his family, but because the cost in effort and guts and knowledge is greater than he is willing to pay. He is happy in his compromise. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm certainly not trying to look down my nose at anyone that finds it necessary to live with less than the best. Far from it. You only have to go back into my early days and see that privation is no stranger to me. I grew up in the Depression days. We all lived then with less than the best, but not by choice. Things were difficult. Dad worked hard. We all were made to understand that it wasn't improper to have biscuits for supper made from WPA relief flour, or to enjoy government beef canned with plain white labels reading, "Gift of the USA." Christmas was a cluster of raisins for us, a cap pistol and some fruit, and it was a great thing and deeply appreciated by every one of us kids. No, there is no shame or disgrace in living in circumstances that are less than the best when you can't do any better. But, gentlemen, it is criminal to live in that kind of an atmosphere because you choose to live that way. In today's world of great promise, there is little justification for settling for half a loaf from life. When you go home tonight, do some soul-searching for your own good. Why not sit down with your wife and with great care make a simple list of the things that should be a part of your world of good living? Make the securing of these things a vital part of your purpose in life, beginning tomorrow. And believe me, if you want it strong enough, hell itself can't stop you. With your permission, may I indulge in a personal experience for just a moment? It's a true story that greatly changed my life. Back in 1951, when I was working for the Holly Motor Company in Tyler, Texas, my dealer made a statement to my wife one day that I was never to completely erase from my mind. This man was an outstanding success in business, and I'm sure that he only desired that I might have a degree of success too. But here is the statement that he made to my wife. He said, "Normally, you don't ask enough from Heartsill. You are too satisfied with just anything that he does. You should ask him to bring you the moon because he is capable of getting it for you if you make him." You know, this statement stuck in my mind for a long, long time, and I recall that statement many, many times in the following months because it was true. I was satisfied with myself. I was satisfied in my job. I was satisfied with my progress. I was even satisfied with my income. So satisfied, in fact, that I was really slipping backwards, and no one knew it any better than I did. That's no longer that way, because today I am hungry for success. I'm no longer satisfied. I'm not willing to settle for just a half a loaf. Today my income is more than 400% greater than it was on that day. My reserve in cash and property is over 1,300% greater than it was that day. Not because I have anything in ability that you don't have. Far from it. Far from it. Most of you have a better foundation for success than I have. But my conversion came, gentlemen, when I determined that I was no longer going to be satisfied with water bugs and grubs. I wanted the minnows, and I was determined to get them, and I'm still looking for minnows today.